Commander Vexilon Kurth of the Hegemony's 7th Analysis Fleet stared at the holographic projection with increasing disbelief. The humans, barely a century into their interstellar development, had just obliterated a Meraxian battle group 3 times their size and technological sophistication. "Play it again," he ordered, mandibles clicking anxiously. His second-in-command intelligence officer Eridine Novum adjusted her ocular implants and restarted the battle footage. The human vessels, crude angular things of metal and ceramic, seemed to violate basic tactical doctrines established over millennia of galactic warfare. They separated instead of forming defensive clusters. They accelerated toward threats rather than maintaining optimal weapons distance. They deliberately vented atmosphere to alter trajectories. "Impossible," muttered Kurth. "By all strategic models, they should have been annihilated." "The Meraxians certainly believe so," replied Novum, her skin shifting to a contemplative azure. "Their battle computers calculated a 97.3% victory probability. The battle replayed before them. Human ships diving between enemy formations, breaking conventional engagement patterns, using moons and debris fields in ways that defied standard void combat algorithms. The Meraxian commander had followed perfect, textbook responses and had been utterly destroyed for it. "High Command has ordered a comprehensive analysis," Novum continued. "The Council is concerned. This is the 3rd human victory against numerically superior forces." Kurth's upper eyes narrowed while his lower pair scanned the tactical readouts. "There must be something we're missing. No species simply emerges into galactic society with such effective combat techniques without prior experience. That's why we've been authorized to assemble a special research division, full access to the restricted archives, including the sealed records from Earth's pre-contact observation period." Kurth felt a chill along his dorsal ridge. The sealed records were rarely accessed, observational data gathered surreptitiously before official first contact with new species. Viewing them required special clearance and usually revealed nothing of tactical significance. "Assemble the team. I want specialists from every analytical discipline. Military historians, xenopsychologists, cultural anthropologists." "Already done, Commander." Novum's skin rippled with efficiency pride. "They await in Research Bay 12, including Professor Zolanti Murev Kurth's breathing tubes constricted. The exile, the one who published those controversial theories about human aggression patterns? The same. His academic standing was destroyed, but his predictions about human expansion have proven 89% accurate." 3 cycles later, Kurth stood before a diverse assemblage of the Hegemony's finest analytical minds. 22 species were represented, from the crystalline Lothri to the gaseous Voon. At the back, isolated by an empty circle of seating, slouched the lanky figure of Professor Murev, his scales dull with age and academic disgrace. "Colleagues," Kurth began, "we face an unprecedented tactical anomaly. Humans have demonstrated combat effectiveness far exceeding their technological development. Our task is to determine why." He activated the central display showing Earth's blue-white sphere. "We begin with the sealed pre-contact records. Unlike most species discovered with early radio emissions and monitored until their first interstellar flights, humans were observed for unusually long periods. The reason? Their behavioral patterns defied predictive models." Professor Murev's gravelly voice cut through the murmuring. "You're about to discover why I was exiled, Commander." The evidence contradicted cherished beliefs about sentient development. Kurth nodded grimly. "Show us, Professor." Murev manipulated the controls with practiced ease despite years away from classified systems. The display shifted to historical footage. Humans in primitive battle formations wielding projectile weapons against each other across muddy fields. "This," said Murev, "is the key to understanding human warfare. They never stopped fighting themselves. Not for a single generation in their entire recorded history." The archival footage shifted through centuries of human conflict. Armored warriors on horseback, disciplined lines of musket-bearing soldiers, massive ironclad vessels exchanging broadside fire, primitive aircraft dropping explosive payloads, and finally, vast mechanized armies clashing across continents. Most spacefaring species, Professor Merev continued, his voice steady despite the horrified gasps around him, experience a unification period lasting thousands of years before achieving interstellar capability. Their conflicts become increasingly ritualized, contained, and eventually diplomatic. Violence becomes abstract, theoretical. The images shifted to devastated cities, mushroom clouds billowing over horizons. Humans never had that luxury. They achieved nuclear capabilities while still divided into competing nation-states. Rather than destroying themselves, as our models predicted, they developed a doctrine called mutually assured destruction and continued innovating methods of warfare. Intelligence. Officer Novum's skin had paled to a sickly white. This contradicts basic evolutionary theory. A species should not advance technologically while maintaining such aggressive tendencies. Hence my exile, Merev replied dryly. The hegemony refused to believe my findings. It was more comfortable to assume my research was flawed. Commander, Kirth studied the progression of human conflicts with growing unease. Their casualty counts, millions dead in single campaigns. How did they maintain societal cohesion through such losses? That, said a new voice, is where it gets truly interesting. All eyes turned to the slender, multi-jointed figure of Dr. Zelevin Vorks, the expedition's leading xenopsychologist. Her feeding tentacles twitched with academic excitement. Humans don't just survive trauma, they transform it. Watch these cultural artifacts produced during and after their conflicts. The display showed literature, artwork, monuments, music, all created in response to or during warfare. They process collective trauma through cultural expression, allowing their societies to absorb catastrophic losses without disintegrating. More remarkably, they incorporate tactical and strategic lessons with unprecedented speed. Vorks manipulated the display, highlighting military doctrines evolving across decades rather than millennia. What takes other species centuries of theoretical development, humans achieve through direct experiential learning. They fail, adapt, and improve within single generations. Commander Kirth felt cold realization spreading through his nervous system. You're suggesting their current space combat doctrine is built on thousands of years of continuous practical combat evolution, Merev finished. While the hegemony has experienced peace for 12 millennia, developing war theory as academic exercise, humans have been refining their understanding of combat through direct application. Show me their military education systems, Kirth ordered. The display shifted to institutions called war colleges and military academies. Humans, in uniform, studied historical battles, conducted simulations, and engaged in elaborate training exercises. They maintain specialized institutions dedicated solely to the study of warfare, observed Novum, even during peacetime. Not just study, corrected Merever. Critical analysis, creative application, innovation. Notice how they treat historical commanders, not as perfect exemplars to be copied, but as case studies with both successes and failures to learn from. The assembled researchers watched in silence as lecture footage showed human instructors dissecting the decisions of their own military leaders, questioning established doctrines, and encouraging alternative approaches. This explains, Kirth said slowly, why standard tactical algorithms fail against them. They're not following a coherent doctrine we can model. They're improvising based on historical precedents we've never encountered. What you're about to see, Professor Merev warned, is classified beyond normal protocols. It required special authorization from the High Council itself. The research chamber dimmed as the display shifted to footage of human military exercises, massive operations involving thousands of personnel, vehicles, and vessels. What struck Commander Kirth immediately was their complexity. These aren't simple training drills, noted military analyst Prelzon, a methane-breathing Algorian whose transparent exoskeleton revealed rapidly pulsing organs. They're creating entire fictional scenarios, complete with opposing forces playing by different rules. Red teams versus blue teams, explained Memrevi. One side represents themselves, the other an anticipated enemy. But notice something crucial. The enemy team is encouraged to develop unexpected tactics. They reward creative violations of established doctrine. Kirth watched, fascinated, as human commanders deliberately placed their forces in disadvantaged positions, then worked to overcome them. They simulated equipment failures, communication breakdowns, and surprise attacks, not just occasionally. They're deliberately practicing failure, he realized aloud. Precisely, said Dr. Vorks. While hegemony military doctrine emphasizes perfect execution of established protocols, human training deliberately introduces chaos and requires adaptation. Their commanders aren't just trained to follow procedures, they're trained to innovate when procedures fail. The display switched to historical footage. A small human vessel surrounded by larger vessels flying different insignia. The smaller ship executed maneuvers that seemed suicidal, closing distance rapidly against overwhelming firepower. The Battle of Samar, Mrev narrated, a tiny escort group of human vessels faced capital ships many times their size and firepower. By all conventional tactical assessments, they should have been annihilated instantly. Instead, they charged. The researchers watched in stunned silence as the outmatched humans closed distance, launched torpedoes from point-blank range, and laid smoke screens to confuse targeting systems. They survived? Asked Novum incredulously. More than survived. They drove off the superior force through sheer audacity. The enemy commander, operating by conventional doctrine, couldn't conceive that such small vessels would attack rather than flee. It violated every principle of self-preservation. Kirth felt, his perception shifting uncomfortably. You're suggesting humans accept individual sacrifice for collective advantage. Beyond acceptance, they celebrate it, corrected Vorks. Their military traditions elevate those who demonstrate courage, the willingness to face certain harm for strategic benefit. The implications settled heavily across the research team. Hegemony tactical doctrine was built on rational actor theory, the principle that all combatants seek to minimize casualties while maximizing effectiveness. Every simulation, every algorithm, every response protocol assumed this fundamental principle. Humans operated differently. We need to understand their command structure, Kirth decided. If their tactical innovations derive from individual initiative rather than centralized control, there must be patterns we can identify. Mrev manipulated the display again, showing a concept humans called mission command, or off-track tactic. Their most effective military organizations operate on distributed authority. Superior officers define objectives, but subordinates determine execution. They call it commander's intent, ensuring lower echelons understand the why behind orders so they can adapt if circumstances change. Intelligence Officer Novum's skin flickered with alarmed patterns. This violates basic military efficiency protocols. How do they maintain coordination without strict hierarchical control? Trust, replied Mrev simply. They cultivate mutual trust across rank structures. Commanders trust subordinates to make tactical decisions. Subordinates trust commanders to establish meaningful objectives. Simulation complete, announced the AI construct. Human response patterns incorporated. Result: hegemony tactical model defeated in 89.7% of scenario variations. Commander Kirth stared at the results in stunned silence. The research team had spent 12 cycles integrating their findings about human warfare into the hegemony's most advanced military prediction systems. The outcome was unequivocal. Standard doctrine failed repeatedly against human approaches. Run variation 7 again, he ordered. Isolate the decision branches. The holographic display expanded, showing a three-dimensional representation of tactical options and outcomes. The branching paths of hegemony responses, logical, methodical, and following optimal protocols, were systematically outmaneuvered by the chaotic, adaptive responses modeled from human behavior. Their unpredictability is actually predictable, observed tactical theorist Brelk Marinium, his crystalline form refracting light as he manipulated the display. When presented with three options, optimal, suboptimal, and seemingly irrational, they Consistently choose the third option at key decision points, creating advantages through surprise. Dr. Vorks tilted her head. Not irrational, counterintuitive. There's a crucial difference. Their choices follow internal logic, just not the logic our systems are designed to anticipate. Kirth focused on one particular battle sequence where simulated human forces split into seemingly vulnerable smaller units rather than concentrating their firepower. This dispersal pattern, he noted, by conventional doctrine it creates multiple points of weakness, yet it repeatedly results in tactical advantage. They call it distributed operations, explained Professor Murev. By accepting vulnerability, in individual units they gain operational flexibility across the battle space. Each unit can function independently toward a common objective, making the force as a whole resistant to decapitation strikes or communication disruption. Intelligence Officer Novum had been unusually quiet, her skin a troubled gray. Commander, I've been analyzing human historical adaptations against technologically superior adversaries. The pattern is concerning. She activated a separate display, showing multiple historical conflicts where technologically disadvantaged human forces had prevailed against superior enemies. They excel at asymmetric approaches, identifying and exploiting systemic weaknesses rather than matching strength against strength. When facing technological disadvantages, they develop counters with remarkable speed. The research chamber fell silent as the implications settled over the assembled experts. The hegemony's military doctrine had evolved over thousands of years of theoretical optimization. Human approaches had evolved through blood, fire, and practical necessity. We need to completely reconsider our understanding of tactical optimization, Kirth finally said. Our models prioritize resource efficiency and casualty minimization based on assumed rational behavior. Humans prioritize mission accomplishment above conventional efficiency metrics. Professor Murev nodded slowly. There's something else you should see. Something that explains why humans fight as they do. The display shifted to simple text, human literature spanning centuries. Poems, letters, speeches, and memoirs from their warriors. Their martial philosophy isn't merely technical, it's deeply embedded in their cultural understanding. Concepts like honor, sacrifice, and brotherhood create cognitive frameworks that enable behaviors our models classify as irrational. Dr. Vorks highlighted passages describing bonds between human soldiers. Their unit cohesion derives from intense interpersonal connections. They don't just fight for abstract principles or survival, they fight for each other. The briefing chamber of the hegemony dreadnought Eternal Doctrine had never been so crowded. 3 Grand Admirals, 7 fleet commanders, and the entire Strategic Assessment Bureau had assembled to hear Commander Kirth's findings. The tension was palpable, creating a miasma of pheromonal signals that the chamber's ventilation systems struggled to process. Grand Admiral Zelvaxis, 600 standard years old and veteran of the last interspecies conflict the hegemony had engaged in, fixed Kirth with all 4 of his primary eyes. Commander, your report suggests a complete overhaul of tactical doctrine established since the founding. The resource implications alone are staggering. Convince me. Kirth activated the central display, showing simulation after simulation where conventional hegemony tactics failed against human-inspired approaches. The evidence is irrefutable, Admiral. Our doctrine assumes rational actors operating from shared tactical axioms. Humans operate from fundamentally different premises. They embrace chaos as advantage. They cultivate tactical creativity rather than procedural perfection. Fleet Commander Erkshin Pell gestured dismissively with an upper manipulator. Isolated victories against minor powers prove nothing. The Meraxians are hardly a measure of true military capability. With respect, Commander, countered Intelligence Officer Novum, her skin pulsing with conviction patterns. The humans didn't just defeat the Meraxians, they invalidated their entire approach to warfare. The same approach we share. Professor Kaitam Murev stepped forward, his scales gleaming under the chamber lights. Years of academic exile had not diminished his authoritative presence. The fundamental issue isn't technology or even tactics, it's conceptual. The hegemony views warfare as a physical problem to be solved through optimal resource application. Humans view it as a psychological contest where perception and will determine outcomes. He displayed human military texts spanning centuries, highlighting concepts like maneuver warfare, shock action, and force multiplication through aggressive initiative. Their entire approach targets the decision cycle of adversaries. They don't seek to overpower enemy formations. They seek to shatter enemy cohesion through rapid, unexpected actions that defy prediction. Strategic Director Olovis Vrem leaned forward, his ancient features twisted with concern. "You're describing psychological warfare. We abandoned such primitive approaches millennia ago as inherently inefficient and unpredictable." "Precisely," agreed Merevi, "and therein lies our vulnerability. We optimized for predictable efficiency. Humans optimized for unpredictable effectiveness." Kirth advanced the presentation to their most disturbing finding: historical analysis of how humans responded to existential threats. Most concerning is humanity's response pattern when facing potential extinction. Rather than seeking accommodation or surrender to preserve population, they demonstrate extreme commitment escalation, what they call back. The display showed desperate human defenses, vastly outnumbered forces fighting with impossible determination, civilian populations transforming into resistance movements, and innovative weapons developed under extreme pressure. "When facing annihilation," explained Dr. Vorks, "humans become more dangerous, not less. Their historical pattern shows that threats to their existence trigger collective psychological responses that override normal constraints on violence and innovation." Grand Admiral Zelvaxis's breathing tubes fluttered with agitation. "You're suggesting that conventional deterrence theory, the foundation of hegemony security policy, doesn't apply to humans?" "Worse," replied Kirth. "I'm suggesting that what would deter other species might actively provoke humans to their most dangerous state." The chamber erupted in multilingual debate, threat displays, and chemical signaling. Kirth stood silently, waiting for the inevitable question that would determine the hegemony's future relationship with humanity. Finally, Fleet Commander Pell vocalized it. "What do you recommend, Commander?" The Grand Council chamber of the hegemony rarely hosted emergency sessions. Its vaulted ceilings, designed to accommodate representatives of all member species, soared hundreds of meters above the assembled dignitaries. Ancient banners commemorating 12,000 years of unified governance hung between pillars of living crystal. Commander Kirth stood at the presentation dais, acutely aware of the historical significance of this moment. Behind him stood his research team, Professor Merev, Dr. Vorks, Intelligence Officer Novum, and 24 specialists who had spent months deciphering the puzzle of human warfare. Supreme Counselor Vexes Har, eldest of the founding species, activated the formal address protocols. "Commander Kirth, your findings have been distributed to all representatives. The implications for hegemony security doctrine are unsettling. Please summarize your recommended course of action." Kirth activated the final presentation sequence displaying a comprehensive strategic assessment. "Honored Council, after exhaustive analysis, we present 3 potential approaches to human military capability." The display showed the first option, a massive military buildup, with resource allocation charts showing trillions of credits diverted to fleet construction. Option 1, conventional deterrence through overwhelming force superiority. We estimate this would require quintupling our military expenditure and diverting 37% of economic output to defense for the next century. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as representatives calculated the impact on their worlds. "Our simulations indicate this approach has a 43% probability of success. The fundamental problem remains. Humans historically respond to force asymmetry, not with submission, but with asymmetric innovation." The display shifted to Option 2, a preemptive containment strategy. Option 2, immediate military action to curtail human expansion while their capabilities remain limited. This approach carries significant risks. If successful, we estimate 70% of human military capability would be neutralized. However, Kirth paused, letting the implication settle. If unsuccessful, or only partially successful, we would likely trigger what humans call a total war response. Based on historical patterns, this would unify human factions against an existential threat and accelerate their military innovation curve by an estimated factor of 7. The council chamber grew deathly quiet. Representatives of 1,000 worlds contemplated the implications of a species that grew stronger, not weaker when threatened. "You mentioned 3 options, Commander," prompted Counselor Vexishar. Kirth nodded and displayed the final recommendation: a radical departure from 12 millennia of hegemony security doctrine. Option 3, strategic partnership. Rather than viewing human military innovation as a threat, we propose integrating it as an asset, a formal alliance that acknowledges and leverages their unique capabilities. The chamber erupted in debate. Alliance with a species barely a century into interstellar development, unprecedented, potentially destabilizing to the careful balance of power within the hegemony itself. Professor Merev stepped forward, his academic standing provisionally restored following the validation of his theories. Esteemed Council, human history demonstrates a consistent pattern. They make either formidable adversaries or invaluable allies. Their loyalty, once earned, is remarkably steadfast. Their cultural narratives celebrate protectors as much as conquerors. Dr. Vorks added her expertise. Psychological analysis suggests humans seek meaning through relationship. Their most destructive tendencies emerge when they perceive threats to their collective identity or those they consider under their protection. Conversely, their protective instincts can be channeled toward mutual security arrangements. Intelligence. Officer Novum's skin displayed conviction patterns as she addressed the council directly. The Meraxian incident proves humans already possess the capability to defeat hegemony tactical systems. The question isn't whether we can contain their military development. That opportunity has passed. The question is whether we direct it toward mutual benefit or mutual destruction. Supreme Counselor Vexishar's ancient features revealed nothing of his thoughts as he studied the proposed alliance framework. After long deliberation, he activated the Council voting protocols. The WAM Council will now vote on Resolution 7291B, Strategic Partnership Initiative with Humanity. 3 days later, Commander Kirth stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Concordant Principles, watching Earth grow larger in the view screen. Beside him, Ambassador Loxaria Nev made final adjustments to the translation systems that would facilitate first formal contact between the Hegemony Grand Council and human leadership. "A historic day, Commander," noted the ambassador. "Your research has fundamentally altered our approach to interspecies relations." Kirth nodded solemnly. "The humans have a concept, Ambassador. They call it respect through strength. Our previous diplomatic initiatives failed because we approached them from a position of technological superiority, assuming they would recognize our advanced development and adapt to our norms. And now? Now we approach them as equals, despite our 12,000-year head start. We acknowledge their martial capabilities and offer partnership rather than patronage." The ambassador's chromatophores displayed skeptical patterns. "And you believe this will succeed where conventional diplomatic approaches failed?" Professor Merev joined them, clutching a data crystal containing his complete research on human military psychology. Research that had once led to his exile, and now formed the foundation of a new interspecies understanding. "Humans respond to authenticity, Ambassador. Their historical diplomatic failures occurred when they perceived condescension or deception. Their successes came through transparent acknowledgement of mutual interest and respect." As Earth filled the view screen, blue oceans, white clouds, and the sprawling lights of human civilization spanning continents, Kirth felt both trepidation and hope. The hegemony had existed for 12 millennia through careful management of interspecies relations, technological development, and military doctrine. Now they faced a species that defied management, a species that had compressed millennia of martial development into centuries through the crucible of continuous conflict. A species whose approach to warfare had evolved not in theoretical models, but in blood and fire. They will change us, Kirth said quietly. Yes, agreed Professor. Fervent, and perhaps we need to be changed. 12,000 years of peace has brought prosperity but also stagnation. The humans remind us of something we've forgotten. Adaptation is survival. As the diplomatic vessel began its approach sequence to Earth's orbital diplomatic station, Commander Kirth reflected on the countless hours of historical battle footage he had analyzed. The humans' remarkable capacity for both violence and cooperation, their ability to transform conflict into innovation, their willingness to sacrifice individual safety for collective advantage. The hegemony had spent 12 millennia perfecting peace. Humans had spent their entire history perfecting warfare, and in doing so had developed strengths the hegemony had sacrificed in pursuit of perfect order. Perhaps together, they would create something greater than either could achieve.